Whispers of a world of culture. Greece. Where the light began and the sea remembers everything. A sleep story and cultural journey. Close your eyes for a moment, and imagine standing at the edge of a great blue sea. The water before you is not simply blue, it is a color that seems to have been invented specifically for this place, a deep, luminous blue that shifts with the movement of the light, that turns green near the shore and indigo toward the horizon, that catches the sun and returns it as something almost unbearably bright. The air is warm and dry and carries with it the smell of thyme and oregano, of stone heated through a long afternoon, of salt and something older still, the indefinable fragrance of a landscape that has been inhabited for thousands of years. Somewhere above you, the columns of a temple rise against the sky, their marble still white despite everything the centuries have done to them, and you understand, perhaps for the first time, that beauty can be patient. This is Greece. Welcome, gently, to one of the oldest continuously inhabited places in the world, a country whose influence on human civilization runs so deep and so wide that the traces of it are present in every language that descends from Greek, in every government that calls itself a democracy, in every hospital that asks its doctors to uphold an oath, in every theater where a story is told in the dark to an audience that is briefly, willingly transformed. Greece is a small country by many measures, but its footprint on the world's imagination is among the largest of any that has ever existed. And yet what makes Greece extraordinary is not only what it gave to the past, it is what it continues to be in the present, a place of extraordinary beauty, of warm and generous people, of a way of life so deeply rooted in its own traditions that it seems, sometimes, to exist at a slight remove from the hurrying world beyond its shores. As we begin this long, slow journey together, there is no need to rush. Let the landscape arrive in its own time. Imagine the light of a Greek morning in late spring, the way it falls across the whitewashed wall of a house on a hillside island, turning the wall from white to cream to the palest gold as the sun rises. Imagine the sound of goat bells moving across a hillside in the early morning quiet, the bells' small music carrying far in the still air. Imagine the smell of coffee rising from an open window, and the sound of the sea, always and always the sound of the sea, working at the pebbles of the shore with a patience that has not changed in 10,000 years. Greece is a country of mainland and islands, a country that is as much sea as it is land. The mainland, in the southern part of the Balkan Peninsula, is a landscape of mountains and valleys, of ancient rivers and deep gorges, of forests of oak and pine and plane tree that cover the slopes above the coastal plains. The Pindus mountain range runs through the center of the country like a spine, its peaks rising above 2,000 meters, its valleys holding small villages that seem not to have changed their essential character in centuries. The Peloponnese, the great peninsula attached to the southern mainland by the narrow isthmus of Corinth, is a landscape of particular richness. The dramatic ruins of Mycenae and Epidaurus and Olympia in their different valleys, the Byzantine city of Mistras clinging to its mountain, the orange groves and vineyards of the fertile plains. The islands are perhaps the image that comes most readily to mind when the world thinks of Greece, and there are so many of them. More than 6,000 islands and islets are scattered across the Aegean and the Ionian seas, from the large and well-known Crete, Rhodes, Corfu, Lesbos, Chios, to the tiny and barely inhabited, mere outcroppings of rock with a chapel and a fishing boat and the memory of someone who once lived there. Each island has its own character, its own accent, its own particular relationship with the sea. The Cyclades, the white and blue islands of the central Aegean, Santorini and Mykonos and Poros and Naxos, are the islands that have become most famous in the world's imagination, their architecture a response to the brilliant light, their walls white to reflect the heat, their blue domes the color of the sky they mirror. Crete, the largest of the Greek islands, a world unto itself, deserves its own mention. Stretching for more than 250 kilometers from east to west, Crete contains within its borders mountains high enough to hold snow in March, gorges deep enough to hold their own climate, fertile valleys producing olive oil and wine and honey of extraordinary quality, and the remnants of the Minoan civilization, the oldest in Europe, whose palace complexes at Knossos and Phaistos still carry, in their ruined corridors and their still vivid frescoes, a sense of a world that was. sophisticated and beautiful and, in the end, lost. The Cretans have a reputation for ferocity and pride, for hospitality so intense it can feel overwhelming, for a music, the lyra and the lauto, that speaks directly to something ancient in the human heart. The light of Greece is a subject that has occupied painters and poets and philosophers for millennia. It is not simply brightness. Many places in the world are bright. It is a quality of clarity, of precision, a light that seems to sharpen the edges of things rather than softening them, that makes the world appear more definitively itself. In this light, the ruins look exactly like what they are, monuments of great age and beauty. In this light, the sea looks exactly like what it is, the connective tissue of a civilization that has always oriented itself toward the horizon. In this light, even the most ordinary things, a glass of water on a cafe table, a line of washing against a white wall, an old man in a black hat walking slowly along a harbor front, acquire a quality that is almost iconic, almost timeless. Greece has 4 distinct seasons, though the summer and the light are what the world most associates with the country. Spring comes early and beautifully, the hillsides covered in wildflowers, the air still cool from the winter, the sea beginning to warm. Summer is long and hot and dry, particularly in the south and the islands, where the sun beats down from a sky of unbroken blue for months. Autumn comes with relief, the temperatures dropping, the first rains arriving, the tourists departing and the islands returning to themselves. Winter in Greece can be cold and wet, particularly in the north and in the mountains, where snow lies for months. But even in winter, the light has a quality unlike winter light in the north, lower and softer, but still clear, still sharp, still capable of illuminating things with precision. Greece's national identity is one of the most complex and layered in the world. The continuity between ancient and modern Greece is real but also complicated. The modern Greek people are the inheritors of the ancient civilization, but they are also the descendants of the Byzantine Empire, of the Ottoman centuries, of the various peoples who moved through the Eastern Mediterranean over 3,000 years of history. Modern Greek identity is shaped by all of these layers simultaneously, and the Greek capacity to hold this complexity, to be at once ancient and modern, European and Mediterranean, deeply traditional and surprisingly adaptable, is one of the most remarkable things about the culture. The philotimo, a word that appears in the values section later but whose presence must be acknowledged here, is perhaps the most distinctively Greek of all cultural concepts. The love of honor, the deep sense of personal dignity and social obligation that shapes how Greeks relate to each other and to the world. It is not a formal code but a felt sense, an instinct toward generosity and correct behavior that is as much emotional as it is rational. To be told that you have philotimo is one of the highest compliments a Greek person can receive. As we gently move through time together in this documentary, we will follow the story of Greece with care and quiet attention. We will walk through ancient ruins and Byzantine monasteries, through the lanes of island villages and the broad avenues of Athens. We will taste the food and hear the music, follow the festivals and the rhythms of the daily life that has been lived here, in essentially this same spirit, for longer than almost anywhere else in the world. For now, simply rest here at the threshold. Imagine the last light of a Greek evening falling across the Acropolis in Athens, the Parthenon pale gold against a sky that is shifting from blue to deep violet, the city below beginning to glow with its own lights, the sound of the city rising and falling like a tide. A swallow cuts through the air between the columns. The temperature is beginning to cool. Somewhere below, in a taverna on a narrow street, someone is setting out chairs and tables on the pavement, and the smell of grilling meat is beginning to drift up through the warm air. This is Greece, and we have only just begun. History in Greece is not something that happened in the past. It is present, here, in the marble underfoot and the horizon beyond. To walk through the agora of ancient Athens, where Socrates walked and argued and asked his questions, is to feel the impossibility of separating the past from the present. To stand at the oracle site of Delphi, where the ancient Greeks came for centuries to ask their most important questions, and to feel the stillness of the mountain valley around you and the weight of all those questions unanswered, is to understand that the distinction between history and experience is, in Greece, less clear than elsewhere. The human story of Greece begins long before the classical period that the world most associates with the country. The first significant civilization of the Aegean was the Minoan, which flourished on the island of Crete from roughly 3000 to 1500 BCE. The Minoans were seafarers and traders, artists and architects, who built palace complexes of extraordinary sophistication and decorated them with frescoes of such freshness and vitality that they still seem to breathe. The famous bull-leaping fresco of Knossos, young figures flying over the back of a charging bull, captures a grace and an energy that seems completely contemporary. The Minoans left no deciphered written language, and so much of what they were remains mystery, which is perhaps its own kind of gift. The Mycenaean civilization, on the mainland, succeeded the Minoans and gave Greece its heroic mythology, the world of Agamemnon and Achilles, of Helen and Odysseus, of the Trojan War whose echoes have resounded through 3,000 years of Western literature. Heinrich Schliemann, the 19th-century archaeologist who found the ruins of Mycenae and believed he was uncovering the world of Homer, held up a golden mask he had found in a royal tomb and declared that he had gazed upon the face of Agamemnon. Whether the mask was truly Agamemnon's or not matters less than the emotion it provokes, the sudden, vertiginous sense of reaching back across the millennia to touch something real and human. The Archaic period, from roughly the 8th to the 6th centuries BCE, was the time when the city-state, the polis, emerged as the defining political form of Greek life, when the Greek alphabet was developed, from Phoenician precursors, when Homer's epics took the written form in which they have been read ever since, and when the first stirrings of what would become the philosophical tradition began. The polis, the self-governing city with its own laws, its own religious life, its own sense of collective identity, was a radical political invention, and the variety of political experiments the Greeks tried in their many hundreds of city-states, democracy, oligarchy, tyranny, aristocracy, constitutes a kind of laboratory of governance whose lessons are still being studied. The classical period, roughly the 5th and 4th centuries BCE, is the era that Greece gave to the world as its defining gift. Athens under Pericles built the Parthenon and the other monuments of the Acropolis, created the first fully functioning democracy, however limited by modern standards in its exclusions, and produced a flowering of philosophy, drama, sculpture, and intellectual inquiry that has never been surpassed in its density and its influence. Socrates and Plato and Aristotle walked these streets and sat in these courtyards. Aeschylus and Sophocles and Euripides and Aristophanes created theatre that is still performed, still emotionally powerful, still illuminating. Phidias created sculptures of such perfection that the later Roman copies, which are all that survive, still move their viewers to something approaching awe. The conquests of Alexander the Great in the second half of the 4th century BCE carried the Greek language and Greek culture across an enormous swath of the known world, from Egypt to the borders of India. The Hellenistic period that followed Alexander's death was one in which Greek became the common language of the educated world, in which the city of Alexandria in Egypt became the greatest center of learning the ancient world had known, in which the synthesis of Greek, Persian, Egyptian, and other traditions produced new forms of art, philosophy, and religion. The Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures, was produced in Alexandria, and the early Christian texts were written in Greek. So the language of Homer became also, through this extraordinary chain of transmission, the language in which the New Testament reached the world. Rome conquered Greece in the 2nd century BCE, but the Greeks, as Horace famously observed, conquered Rome in return, through their culture, their philosophy, their art, their literature. The Roman world was saturated with Greek influence. Every educated Roman learned Greek as a second language, and the philosophies of Stoicism and Epicureanism, born in Athens, shaped Roman thought and through it the whole of later Western civilization. The Byzantine Empire, the eastern continuation of the Roman Empire, which survived the fall of Rome in the West by nearly 1,000 years, was, in its culture and its language, essentially Greek. Constantinople, the new Rome, built on the site of the Greek city of Byzantium, was the greatest city in Christendom for centuries, a center of art and learning and theological debate that maintained the tradition of Greek civilization through the long centuries of the medieval period. The fall of Constantinople to the Ottoman Turks in 1453 is one of the great hinge points of world history. The scholars who fled westward, carrying their manuscripts and their knowledge, helped to spark the Italian Renaissance. And within Greece itself, the 4 centuries of Ottoman rule that followed, a period known in Greek memory as the Technocratia, were a time of cultural resilience and quiet continuity, in which the Orthodox Church, the monasteries, and the village communities maintained the Greek language and the Greek cultural inheritance through generations of political subjugation. The Greek War of Independence, which began in 1821 and was supported by Philhellenes from across Europe who saw in it the struggle of the land of democracy against oppression, led to the establishment of the modern Greek state. The first decades of the new state were difficult. The adjustment to statehood after centuries of foreign rule, the definition of national boundaries, the resolution of the question of which of the many legacy traditions should constitute the Greek national identity. The figure of Ioannis Kapodistrias, the first governor of independent Greece, a diplomat of European standing who tried to build the institutions of a modern state, and the legacy of figures like Regas Faraios, the revolutionary intellectual who died for the dream of a free Greece, are remembered with genuine reverence. The 20th century brought Greece through 2 world wars, an Axis occupation of particular cruelty, a civil war, and a military dictatorship that lasted until 1974. Through all of this, the Greek capacity for survival and regeneration, the same quality that had carried the culture through Byzantine centuries and Ottoman rule, proved equal to the demands placed upon it. The restoration of democracy in 1974, and the subsequent decades of economic development and cultural flowering, brought Greece into the European mainstream while maintaining the deep roots that connect modern Greek life to its ancient and Byzantine inheritance. Today, Greece carries its history with a combination of pride and lightness that is characteristic. The ruins are present everywhere, not as burdens but as natural features of the landscape, as much a part of the environment as the sea and the light. The past is not a heavy thing in Greece. It is something the culture lives alongside comfortably, with the ease of long familiarity. Language in Greece is not simply a means of communication. It is a living connection to one of the longest continuous linguistic traditions in the world. The Greek language has been spoken and written without interruption for more than 3,000 years. The same alphabet that Sophocles used to write his tragedies is the alphabet with which a Greek child learns to read today. The words that Plato chose to describe his philosophical ideas, logos, psyche, cosmos, idea, democracy, are the words that modern languages borrowed directly, carrying with them, in their very sounds, the echo of the mind that first used them. To speak Greek is to inhabit a tradition of extraordinary depth and continuity. Greek belongs to its own branch of the Indo-European language family. It is not closely related to any other modern language, though it is a distant cousin of the Sanskrit and Latin and Persian and Germanic and Slavic languages that form the rest of the Indo-European family. This isolation has given it a character that is entirely its own, a sound quality of particular beauty, with its long vowels and its musical pitch accent, its complex system of verb tenses that allow a speaker to distinguish not only when something happened but what kind of action it was and what relationship it had to the speaker's present moment. The sound of modern Greek spoken in conversation has a warmth and an expressiveness that are immediately appealing. The vowels are pure and open, more Italian in their clarity than English in their murkiness. The consonants have a particular music, especially the combinations that produce the sounds foreigners find hardest to reproduce, the GH and the KH and the PS and the TS that give the language its distinctive texture. Greek has a rolling energy in conversation. The sentences build and accumulate, the gestures accompanying the words, the voice rising and falling in a cadence that seems to say, in its rhythm alone, that whatever is being discussed matters, that it deserves this animation and this attention. The history of the Greek language is itself a fascinating journey. Ancient Greek, the language of Homer and Plato and the New Testament, existed in multiple dialects. Attic, the dialect of Athens that became the standard literary language. Doric, the dialect of Sparta and Corinth. Ionic, the dialect of the eastern Aegean islands and coast, and others. Over centuries, these dialects merged into the Koine, the common Greek, that became the lingua franca of the Hellenistic world and the language of the New Testament. The Byzantine Greek of the medieval period evolved gradually into the modern language, though the educated tradition maintained a strongly archaic character well into the 19th century. Modern Greek exists in two main registers: the demotic, the everyday spoken language, and the formal, slightly more archaic written standard, though the distinction has become much less marked since the official adoption of demotic as the standard language in 1976. The long debate over which form of Greek should be the national standard, the artificial purified Katharavousa that sought to restore ancient forms, or the living spoken language, was one of the defining cultural and political arguments of the modern Greek state, and its resolution in favor of the living language was a victory for the democratic principle that language belongs to the people who speak it. Greek has given the world more words than almost any other language. The vocabulary of medicine, philosophy, mathematics, science, theology, and politics is saturated with Greek roots, so much so that a new concept in almost any of these fields is typically named with a Greek compound, as if the language has a permanent claim on the realm of ideas. Democracy, philosophy, psychology, biology, theology, mathematics, history, geography, economy, the list runs on essentially without end. This is not merely etymological trivia. It reflects the genuine intellectual originality of the ancient Greek mind, which needed new words because it was having new thoughts. Greek expressions carry within them windows onto the culture's deepest values. Kalimera, good morning, literally good day, is the standard greeting, but it is delivered with a warmth that the English equivalent rarely matches. Yamas, to our health, is the toast raised at every table and every gathering, a brief acknowledgement that the pleasure of being alive together is the real subject of every meal. Siga siga, slowly slowly, is the Greek equivalent of the Italian piano piano, a counsel of patience and ease that appears in conversation whenever someone seems to be in too much of a hurry. Philoxenia, the love of the stranger, the hospitality extended to the guest, is a word that names one of the deepest Greek values in a single beautiful compound. Greek communication style is warm, direct, and physically expressive. Greeks tend to stand close to the people they speak with, to make sustained eye contact, to touch in conversation. An arm, a shoulder, the natural physical language of genuine engagement. Disagreement is expressed directly and without apology. The Greek conversation that sounds, to foreign ears, like an argument is often simply an animated discussion of a topic that both parties find interesting. Silence in Greek social situations is uncomfortable in a way that it is not in Northern European cultures. The obligation to fill the space with warmth and conversation and food is a social imperative. The oral tradition of Greece is among the oldest and richest in the world. Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, composed in an oral tradition of professional bards before they were written down, are the founding texts of Western literature, and they remain, in Greek schools and in Greek cultural consciousness, central and alive. The tradition of oral poetry and storytelling continues in the Cretan mantinades, the improvised rhyming couplets that Cretan men compose and exchange at celebrations, in the Kleftika songs of the mountains, and in the living tradition of the Greek ballad. The story told well, with the right timing and the right animation, remains one of the great pleasures of Greek social life. If we listen closely to the sound of Greek, the conversations in the cafeneo, the prayers in the church, the laughter of children in the street, the song of the singer at the summer festival, the sound of the sea in the pauses between words, we hear something that has been continuous for 3,000 years, something that has absorbed everything that happened to it and remained, unmistakably and magnificently, itself. At the heart of Greek culture lies a set of values that have deep roots in the ancient world and remain powerfully alive in the present, values that shape daily life in ways both visible and invisible, that can be felt in the warmth of a greeting and the generosity of a table and the fierce pride of someone defending the honor of their family and their community. These values are not abstract principles, they are embodied practices, lived daily in the texture of ordinary life. Philotimo, the love of honor, is perhaps the most distinctively Greek of all cultural values, and the one most frequently invoked by Greeks themselves when they try to explain what their culture is. At its simplest, philotimo is a sense of personal dignity and social obligation, the feeling that one's behavior reflects on one's family and community, that one owes it to those around one to behave generously and correctly. But it is also more than this. It is a positive quality, an instinct toward goodness and generosity that operates without calculation, that does the right thing not because of what it will bring in return but because it is the right thing. The Greek who drives an hour to bring a meal to a sick neighbor, who spends beyond their means to give a guest a magnificent welcome, who defends a friend's reputation at some cost to themselves, this is philotimo in action. Philoxenia, the love of the stranger, is the expression of philotimo in the context of hospitality. The ancient Greek world had a concept of xenia, the sacred obligation to welcome and protect the stranger, that was enforced, in mythology, by Zeus himself in his role as the protector of guests. This ancient obligation has survived into modern Greek culture in the form of a hospitality that visitors consistently find astonishing. The Greek host who insists that the guest eat more than is comfortable, who refuses to allow the guest to contribute anything, who treats the visitor's presence as a gift rather than an imposition. This is not mere politeness. It is a genuine belief, rooted in something very ancient, that the welfare of the guest is a matter of honor and sacred obligation. Family is the central institution of Greek social life. More than in many other European cultures, the Greek family is a dense, multilayered, emotionally intense unit that provides the primary context of belonging, the primary source of practical support, and the primary arena of identity formation. The extended family, grandparents, uncles and aunts, cousins, is closely involved in the lives of its members in ways that more individualistic cultures might find intrusive but that Greeks find natural and sustaining. The Sunday family lunch, the name day celebration that brings the whole family together, the consultation of parents and grandparents in major life decisions. These are expressions of a family-centered culture that has been maintained across many centuries. The kafeneo, the traditional Greek coffee house, is one of the great social institutions of the country, particularly in villages and small towns, where it functions as a combination of news exchange, social club, and philosophical forum. The men who gather in the kafeneo, it has traditionally been a male space, though this is changing, are not merely drinking coffee. They are maintaining the social fabric of the community, exchanging information, forming and expressing opinions, and practicing the ancient Greek art of conversation. The capacity for animated, extended, genuinely engaged discussion of topics from the local to the cosmic is a cultural inheritance that goes back to the agora of ancient Athens. The concept of kefi, the joyful, spontaneous spirit of celebration that animates the best moments of Greek social life, is another distinctively Greek value. Kefi is not happiness as a steady state. It is joy as an event, a breakthrough, a sudden intensification of feeling that finds its expression in music and dance and the breaking of plates and the general abandonment of restraint. A Greek celebration at its best is not merely a pleasant gathering. It is a transformation, a moment in which ordinary life is briefly suspended in favor of something more intense and more alive. The Zorba moment, the sudden irresistible urge to dance, is real in Greek culture, not a tourist cliché, and it speaks to a genuine philosophy. That life, with all its difficulty and uncertainty, deserves moments of pure, unguarded joy. The Greek relationship with time has a particular quality that reflects the culture's deep sense of historical continuity. Greeks do not experience time as a resource to be optimized. They experience it as the medium in which life unfolds at its natural pace. Meals take as long as they take. Conversations continue until there is nothing more to say. Decisions are made when they are ready to be made. This is not laziness. The Greek capacity for hard work, particularly in business and in the professions, is formidable. It is a different philosophy of what time is for. The afternoon that extends into the evening over coffee and conversation is not a waste of time. It is time well spent, time given to the most important human activities. In many homes, the values of the Greek family are maintained through a combination of warmth and expectation that can feel, from the inside, simultaneously supportive and demanding. The Greek mother who worries about whether her children are eating enough, sleeping enough, working too hard or not hard enough. This is a figure of both affection and occasional exasperation in Greek cultural consciousness, a loving presence that is also a constant reminder of the obligations of family life. These obligations are real and genuinely felt, and the Greek who moves far from their family carries with them a homesickness, a nostalgia, to use the Greek word, that is not merely sentimental but a response to the genuine importance of the ties they have left behind. Over generations, the values of Greece, Philotimo and Philoxenia, family and Kephi, the love of conversation and the capacity for joy, have shaped a way of being in the world that is recognizably and warmly itself. It is a culture that has survived enormous difficulty with its essential character intact, and that continues to offer, to those who encounter it with openness, something genuinely nourishing. The pleasure of being welcomed, the pleasure of good food at a table that was set just for you, the pleasure of a conversation that goes on into the evening because no one can bear to let it end. In Greece, the sacred is present in the quality of the light itself. This is not metaphor. The Greek Orthodox tradition has always understood the divine as something that can be seen, that is present in the world as light, that was revealed on Mount Tabor in the Transfiguration and that continues to illuminate the icons, the candles, the golden mosaics of the churches with a brightness that is not merely physical. The Orthodox Church is not only the spiritual home of the great majority of Greeks, it is the institution that maintained Greek identity through the long centuries of Byzantine and Ottoman rule, that preserved the language and the culture through every kind of adversity, and that remains today woven into the fabric of Greek life from the cradle to the grave. The Greek Orthodox tradition is one of the oldest and most continuous in Christianity. The Orthodox Church traces its origins to the apostolic communities of the New Testament world, to the churches founded by Paul in Corinth and Thessaloniki and Philippi, to the theological tradition developed in Alexandria and Antioch and Constantinople, to the great ecumenical councils of the 4th and 5th centuries at which the foundational doctrines of Christian belief were hammered out in the Greek language that was the common tongue of the Eastern Mediterranean world. The liturgy of the Orthodox Church is an experience of extraordinary sensory richness. To enter an Orthodox church during the Divine Liturgy is to enter a world in which every element has been calibrated to create an atmosphere of sacred beauty. The smell of incense, rising in slow spirals from the censer as the priest moves through the church. The sound of the choir, singing in the Byzantine tradition of unaccompanied polyphony that has been essentially unchanged for 15 centuries. The light of the candles, the thin yellow beeswax candles that worshippers light and place in the sand before the icons, each candle a prayer made visible. The icons themselves, looking down from the walls and the iconostasis with expressions of a formal tenderness, their gold backgrounds catching the candlelight and returning it as a warm, diffuse glow. The icon is the most characteristic art form of Orthodox Christianity, and it is deeply connected to a theology of presence, the belief that the icon is not merely a representation of the holy person depicted, but a window through which the holy person is actually present and can be approached. Icons are venerated, kissed, touched, carried in procession, with a physical reverence that reflects this theology of presence. The tradition of icon painting follows strict rules of composition and technique that have been maintained across many centuries, and the icon painter is understood as engaged in a spiritual as well as an artistic practice, preparing themselves through fasting and prayer before beginning work, understanding themselves as the servant of a tradition rather than the expression of an individual vision. Easter, Pascha, is the supreme celebration of the Greek Orthodox calendar, and its observance in Greece is one of the most beautiful religious experiences in the Christian world. The Holy Week that precedes Easter Sunday is a week of intensifying solemnity and beauty. The mournful lamentations of Holy Friday, when the epitaphios, the flower-decorated bier representing the body of Christ, is carried through the streets of every village and city in a slow procession accompanied by the slow tolling of bells and the smell of incense and the sound of the women's lament. And then, at midnight on Holy Saturday, the miracle of the resurrection light, the priest emerging from the darkened church carrying the holy fire, the word Christus anesti, Christ is risen, announced, the flame passed from candle to candle through the crowd until the churchyard blazes with 1,000 lights. The response, alithos anesti, he is truly risen, rises from every throat, and the bells begin, and the fireworks, and the joy that erupts after the long fast and the long darkness is genuinely overwhelming. The celebration of name days, the feast days of the saints after whom Greeks are named, is another expression of the Orthodox calendar's deep integration with social life. In Greece, the name day is as important as, or in many families more important than, the birthday. On your name day, you do not receive gifts, you give them, treating your friends and family to food and drink. The friend who calls to say Chronia Polla, many years, the standard greeting for any celebration, and receives a welcome of coffee and sweets is participating in a ritual that connects the individual to the larger community of saints and to the liturgical year that structures time. Alongside the official Orthodox faith, Greek culture maintains a rich tradition of popular belief that coexists comfortably with Orthodox practice. The evil eye, tomati, is taken seriously across all social classes and generations. The blue eye amulet, the glass eye bead hung in houses and cars and around the necks of children, is a protective charm against the envy that can cause harm to those it is directed at. The woman who knows the words of the Matiasma, the incantation that cures the evil eye, is a figure of practical spiritual knowledge, her skill a service to the community. These beliefs are not in tension with Orthodox Christianity. They are part of the same spiritual landscape, addressing different aspects of the vulnerability of human life. The monasteries of Greece, from the extraordinary collection on the peninsula of Mount Athos, where 20 monasteries have maintained an unbroken monastic tradition for 1,000 years, to the famous monasteries of Mytura in Thessaly, perched on their extraordinary pinnacles of rock, are places where the spirit of the Orthodox tradition is most completely and most purely expressed. To visit the monasteries of Mytura, to see those stone pillars rising from the plain, the ancient buildings built on their summits seemingly in defiance of gravity, the monks who still live there maintaining the ancient rhythm of prayer, is to encounter a form of human dedication to the spiritual life that is humbling and beautiful in equal measure. In the soft fabric of tradition, Greece's customs carry the warmth of a culture that has always understood celebration as a serious and necessary human activity. From the exuberance of Easter to the quiet intimacy of a name-day gathering, from the summer panegyri to the solemn beauty of a village wedding, tradition in Greece is a living practice, adapted and renewed by each generation while maintaining the essential continuity that gives it its depth and its beauty. The Greek wedding is a ceremony of great warmth and communal participation. The traditional Orthodox wedding service, the ceremony of the crowning, in which the bride and groom are crowned with the stephana, the wreaths of orange blossom or myrtle linked by a white ribbon, is one of the most beautiful in the Christian world. The priest leads the couple 3 times around the altar, the dance of Isaiah, in a moment that combines the solemnity of the sacrament with the quality of lightness and joy. The reception that follows involves music and dancing that can continue into the dawn, with the first dance of the couple followed by the sirtaki and the hasapiko and whatever other dances the musician knows and the guests have energy for. The panegyri, the village festival held on the name day of the patron saint, is the summer institution of Greek social life in rural and island communities. The panegyri takes place in the village square or in the churchyard, after the evening liturgy, when the tables are set with food and the musicians take their positions and the evening begins. Families travel long distances to attend the panegyri of their home village and the gathering of generations, the old who remember every previous year, the young who are experiencing it for the first time, creates a quality of layered time that is deeply affecting. The dancing that eventually begins, the circle dances and the couples dances, each with their regional character, is not entertainment but participation, not performance but community. Apokris, the Greek carnival season, corresponding to the period before Lent, is celebrated with particular exuberance in certain cities and regions. The Potras Carnival, one of the largest in Europe, transforms the city for 3 weeks in late winter with elaborate floats and costumes and street performances that draw hundreds of thousands of participants. The Clean Monday, Kathra Deftera, that marks the beginning of Lent is itself a celebration of a peculiarly Greek kind. Families gather in the open air, fly kites, eat the traditional Lenten foods, lagona flatbread, tarama salata, seafood, halva, and the day has a quality of fresh, windy, slightly melancholy pleasure that is entirely characteristic of the Greek approach to seasonal transition. The Greek tradition of offering in churches, the toma, the votive offering left before an icon, speaks to the intimate, practical quality of Greek religious devotion. A small silver plaque in the shape of the body part that was healed, a candle lit for a safe journey, a photograph of the person who has been the subject of prayer. These offerings accumulate on the surfaces before the most venerated icons, a material record of the ongoing conversation between the living and the sacred. Funeral customs in Greece maintain the orthodox tradition of burial within 24 to 48 hours of death, the body washed and dressed and laid out for the family and community to pay their respects. The mourning period involves the gathering of family and community in a way that ensures the bereaved are not left alone with their grief. The visits, the food brought by neighbors, the prayers said together, the stories told about the deceased. The 3-year anniversary visit to the grave, when the bones are exhumed and placed in the ossuary, a practice that seems stark to outsiders but that reflects a particular relationship with the body as temporary vessel, is accompanied by a service and a gathering that is as much celebration of the life lived as mourning for the life ended. The tradition of the Greek summer, the return to the ancestral village, the gathering of the diaspora with the stay-at-homes, the weeks of family life conducted in an outdoor rhythm of beach and table and late evenings, is itself one of the great customs of Greek life. The Athenian family that descends on the island or the village house in August, the cousins who arrive from Germany and Australia and America, the house that expands to accommodate them all. This annual gathering is a form of cultural maintenance, a way of keeping alive the connections that the rest of the year threatens to attenuate. The custom of the Easter bread, the tsureki, a sweet braided bread flavored with mastic and marlab, often with a red egg nestled in its center, is one of the most delicious expressions of the Greek tradition of giving food a ceremonial role. The red eggs of Easter, hard-boiled eggs dyed deep red for the blood of Christ, are exchanged and cracked against each other in the game of tsugrism, the game of the eggs. The person whose egg survives uncracked is said to have good luck for the coming year. These small rituals, repeated year after year within the family, are how the tradition lives, not in the grand ceremony but in the specific texture of the egg in the hand, the sound of the crack, the particular smell of the tsureki warm from the oven. Greek food is sunshine made edible. It is the long summer light captured in olive oil and tomato, the warmth of the sea preserved in grilled fish and octopus dried on a line, the mineral clarity of the air made manifest in the austere, exact flavors of feta and rigani, oregano, and lemon. Greek cuisine is one of the oldest in the world, and it is one of the healthiest. The Mediterranean diet, of which Greek cooking is the prototype, has been studied and celebrated for its capacity to sustain long, healthy, pleasurable lives. But the Greeks themselves do not eat well because they are following a health philosophy. They eat well because they love good food, because quality ingredients are a source of genuine pride, and because the meal, the shared meal, the table set for family and friends and whoever else arrives, is one of the great rituals of Greek social life. The foundation of Greek cooking is the olive tree, the olive oil, the olive preserved in brine or cured in salt. The olive tree has been cultivated in Greece for at least 4,000 years, and the relationship between the Greek landscape and the olive is so deep that it feels geological rather than agricultural. The ancient olive groves of Crete and Laconia and Lesbos, with their gnarled trunks and their silver-green leaves, are among the oldest living things in Europe, and the oil they produce has a flavor that carries within it something of that antiquity. A fruitiness and a pepperiness and a bitterness that together produce a taste of almost structural complexity. Greek olive oil, pressed from olives that are picked early, before full ripeness, to preserve the polyphenols that give the oil its character, is used generously and without apology in everything. Feta cheese, the white, crumbly, slightly salty cheese made from sheep's milk in the traditional way, is perhaps the most internationally recognized of Greek foods, and it is genuinely extraordinary in its own country. The feta made in small dairies in the mountains of Epirus or the Peloponnese is a different thing from the commercial version that fills supermarket shelves. more complex in flavor, creamier in texture, with a lactic brightness that makes it the perfect foil for the sweetness of ripe tomatoes and the fruitiness of good olive oil. A Greek salad, the Koreatiki, the village salad, made with summer tomatoes and cucumbers and green pepper and Kalamata olives and a generous slab of feta, dressed with olive oil and a pinch of oregano, is one of the most perfect combinations in all of cooking. The mazides, the small dishes that are the Greek equivalent of tapas, are perhaps the best expression of the Greek philosophy of eating. The idea that the meal is a social event, that food should be shared, that many small pleasures are better than a single large one. Tzatziki, the cool yogurt and cucumber dip flavored with garlic and dill. Tarama salata, the roe dip, pink and silky and rich. Dolmades, vine leaves stuffed with rice and herbs, served with lemon. Tipiti, roasted red pepper and feta blended together into a warmly flavored spread. Grilled halloumi, its surface golden and slightly charred. These are the foods that arrive at the beginning of a Greek meal and that, eaten slowly with good bread and cold wine, can make the main course seem almost unnecessary. Grilled fish is one of the great pleasures of the Greek table. The fish pulled from the Aegean or the Ionian that morning, prepared simply and directly, the grill marks on its skin, the flesh white and sweet and flaking from the bone, dressed with nothing more than lemon and olive oil and perhaps a little rigani. The Greek approach to fish is an expression of the broader culinary philosophy. If the ingredient is good enough, interference is a mistake. The lavriki, sea bass, grilled over charcoal, the tsipora, sea bream, baked in salt, the red mullet, barbunia, fried crisp and eaten whole, these are dishes that achieve their effect through the quality of what they are rather than through the complexity of what is done to them. Lamb is the great meat of Greek cuisine, associated with Easter and with celebration and with the generous hospitality of the countryside. Lamb roasted on a spit over a wood fire, kleftiko, slow cooked in a sealed clay pot with lemon and garlic and oregano until the meat falls from the bone. The leg of lamb baked with potatoes in the wood-fired oven that Greek villages still use for the Sunday meal. All of these are expressions of the same principle, that animal welfare and proper husbandry produce meat of extraordinary quality, and that long, slow cooking with simple aromatics brings out everything that quality has to offer. Honey is another of Greece's great natural gifts, the honey of Hymettus near Athens, the honey of the thyme-scented hillsides of Crete, the forest honey of the northern mainland. Greek honey is extraordinarily varied in its flavors, each reflecting the particular flora of its region, and it is used generously in cooking and in sweets, in the baklava of layered phyllo pastry and nuts soaked in honey syrup, in the mela macarona, honey cookies, of Christmas, in the loukoumades, honey-drenched donut balls, that are the street food of festivals. The Greek table is set with an expectation of abundance, not the false abundance of excess but the genuine abundance of quality and variety and generosity. The host who apologizes for not having more, who continues to press food upon guests who are already full, who is visibly distressed by the slightest sign of an unenjoyed dish. This is not performance but the genuine expression of the belief that nourishing people well is one of the most important things a person can do. To leave a Greek table hungry is a failure of hospitality of almost theological gravity. Every society has its unwritten architecture of social expectation, the invisible codes that govern how people treat each other in the street and at the table and in the space between public and private. In Greece, this architecture has been shaped by the ancient tradition of the polis, the city-state where public life was conducted face-to-face in the agora, by the Orthodox tradition's emphasis on community and mutual obligation, by the Mediterranean temperament that places warmth and physical expressiveness at the center of human encounter, and by the particular Greek combination of fierce independence and genuine communal solidarity. Greek social life is conducted at a pace and a physical proximity that can surprise people from more reserved cultures. The conversation at a cafe table is animated and close. The greetings when friends meet are warm and physically generous. The embrace, the cheek kisses, the hands held for a moment, the eye contact that is direct and sustained. This physical expressiveness is not intrusive. It is the natural language of a culture in which genuine interest in the other person is the baseline of social interaction. The Greek friend who asks about your health, your family, your work, your current troubles and pleasures is not making conversation. They are exercising a genuine and valued curiosity about the life of another person. The concept of paria, the company, the group of friends who gather regularly and constitute a social unit, is central to Greek social life. The paria is not merely a collection of individuals who happen to like each other. It is a stable social formation with its own history and its own rituals, a group that meets regularly for food and wine and conversation, and that provides, for its members, a primary context of social belonging outside the family. The paria at the taverna on a Friday evening, the paria that gathers at the cafeneo for the morning coffee. These are not casual gatherings but social institutions, maintained with a regularity and a commitment that reflects their importance to the individuals involved. Respect for elders is a genuine and consistent value in Greek social life. The elderly person, the yiaya, the papas, the grandmother and grandfather whose presence at the family table is a mark of honor, occupies a position of genuine authority and affection. Their opinions are sought and their comfort is prioritized. The Greek grandmother who rules the household from her chair by the kitchen window is not merely a beloved figure. She is the keeper of the family's memory, the practitioner of the recipes and the customs and the prayers that connect the present to the past. The Greek attitude toward obligation and reciprocity has a particular character. Favors are expected to be remembered and repaid, not necessarily in kind but in the broader currency of loyalty and solidarity. The network of mutual obligation that binds friends and neighbors and family members is understood not as a burden but as the practical expression of the social bond. The mechanic who gives a friend a discount, the lawyer who advises a cousin without charge, the neighbor who waters the plants when the family is away, these are not extraordinary acts of generosity but the ordinary operation of a social system based on loyalty and mutual support. The Greek capacity for kephi, for the spontaneous, joyful celebration that breaks out at the right moment, has its social counterpart in a certain emotional directness that can surprise people from cultures where feeling is more carefully managed. A Greek who is happy expresses it, a Greek who is sad expresses that too, a Greek who is angry does not usually conceal the fact. This emotional directness is not rudeness, it is the expression of a genuine belief that authentic feeling deserves authentic expression, that the management of emotion into socially acceptable forms is a kind of dishonesty. Public spaces in Greece are used with a communal ease that reflects the culture's long tradition of outdoor social life. The platea, the village square, is the center of community life, the place where the evening volta takes place, where the cafes set out their chairs, where the children play and the old men discuss the events of the day. The Greek taverna, the restaurant in the garden or the terrace or the converted warehouse, is a social institution as much as a culinary one, a place where the evening can be extended indefinitely because no one is in a hurry to leave and the proprietor is not in a hurry to reclaim the table. In the quiet rhythm of everyday life, the social norms of Greece represent the accumulated wisdom of a culture that has been practicing the art of living together for an extraordinarily long time, and that has found in the warmth of human connection, the paria, the philoxenia, the kephi, the primary resource for a good life. These norms are not perfect, and Greek society, like all societies, contains its contradictions and its tensions. But the underlying impulse toward warmth and generosity and genuine human engagement is real, and it makes encountering Greek social life one of the most immediately rewarding experiences the world has to offer. Imagine walking through a village in the Peloponnese on a Sunday morning, the air still cool from the night, the church bell beginning to sound from the hillside. The older women coming to the liturgy are dressed in the black that widowhood requires, not the black of fashion but the black of mourning maintained across years, a visible sign of loss and of loyalty to the memory of the departed. The younger women are in their best, the colors of the season, the careful attention to appearance that Sunday demands, the small jewelry that was a grandmother's gift. The men in their pressed trousers and their good shoes. Dress in Greece is a social language, and it is spoken with seriousness and care. The traditional costume of Greece is one of the most varied and richly detailed in Europe, a reflection of the country's regional diversity and its long history of cultural encounter. Each region of Greece has its own traditional dress, its own particular combination of fabric and color and embroidery that marks it as belonging to that specific place. The fustanella, the white pleated kilt worn by Greek men in certain traditional costumes, and still worn by the Evzones, the ceremonial guard of the tomb of the unknown soldier in Athens, is perhaps the most internationally recognizable of the Greek traditional garments, its crisp white pleats and its black pompon shoes creating a silhouette of extraordinary graphic power. The traditional women's costumes of Greece are perhaps even more varied and more beautiful. The embroidered chemises of the Dodecanese, with their dense, colorful patterns worked in silk thread on white linen. The richly embroidered aprons of Thessaly. The dark velvet and gold-threaded jackets of the Epirus. Each regional costume is a record of the textile traditions of its place, the weaving techniques, the dyeing traditions, the embroidery patterns that have been passed from mother to daughter across many generations. To see a collection of Greek regional costumes assembled in one place is to understand the country's extraordinary cultural richness, the sheer variety of ways in which Greek identity has expressed itself in cloth and thread and color. The embroidery tradition of Greece is ancient and alive. The embroidered household linens, the bed covers and the towels and the tablecloths that were part of every Greek woman's dowry until very recently, are an art form in their own right, their patterns drawn from a vocabulary of geometric and natural motifs that goes back to the ancient world. The embroidery of the Aegean Islands, particularly the elaborate, densely worked embroideries of Rhodes and Skyros and Lefkada, is among the most sophisticated folk textile art in Europe. Gold jewelry has been a central part of Greek adornment since antiquity. The gold work of the Minoan and Mycenaean periods is among the most accomplished of the ancient world, and the tradition of fine goldsmithing has been maintained across 3,000 years. The gold jewelry that a Greek woman receives at her wedding, from her family and her husband's family, is not merely ornamental. It is a form of stored wealth, a material expression of the family's investment in the couple's future. The tradition of giving gold, a chain, a ring, an earring, at significant life occasions is maintained across all social classes, reflecting both the practical value of gold as a store of wealth and the symbolic value of the gift as a permanent record of a relationship. The evil eye amulet, the blue glass eye bead, is the most universally worn protective charm in Greek culture, and it has a visual identity so strong and so simple that it has become one of the most recognizable symbols of Greece in the world's imagination. Worn around the neck, tied to a baby's wrist, hung in the car, set in the doorway. The blue eye is both a protective gesture and a cultural statement, a small assertion of the belief that the world is not entirely predictable and that a little protection, however symbolically expressed, is worth having. Modern Greek dress is urban, stylish, and European in its orientation. Greeks in the cities dress with the same attention to fashion and appearance as their counterparts in Milan or Madrid. The Athenian woman in her carefully considered outfit, the Greek man whose casual clothes have been chosen with the same care that less fashion-conscious cultures reserve for formal occasions. These are expressions of the same value that produces the traditional costumes and the gold jewelry. The belief that appearance is a form of self-expression and self-respect, that how one presents oneself to the world is a matter worthy of genuine attention. In Greek culture, art is not a category that stands apart from life. It is the oldest and deepest expression of the Greek engagement with the world, the medium through which the culture has always asked its most important questions and offered its most beautiful answers. The gift of Greece to the world's artistic inheritance is immeasurable. The Western tradition of literature, theatre, sculpture, architecture, and philosophy is so thoroughly rooted in ancient Greek achievement that to describe it is almost to describe Greek art itself. And yet the living art of modern Greece, the Rebetiko and the Laika, the poetry of Sepphoris and Elates, the films of Angelopoulos, the contemporary sculpture, is not merely the inheritance of the ancient but something alive and continuing, speaking in its own voice to its own time. The ancient Greek contribution to sculpture is perhaps the area where the achievement most clearly transcends its historical moment. The development, across the archaic and classical periods, of an ideal of the human form, the kourouros and kore of the archaic period with their frontal rigidity and their archaic smile giving way to the astonishing naturalism of the classical period, in which the human body is rendered with a precision and a grace that has never been surpassed, represents one of the great leaps of artistic imagination in human history. The Discobolus of Myron, the Doriphoros of Polykleitos, the Nike of Samothrace, the Venus de Milo. These are works whose influence on subsequent Western art is incalculable, whose formal perfection continues to move viewers who know nothing of the theoretical principles behind them. Architecture in Greece achieved in the classical period a system of proportions and formal relationships. The orders, the triglyphs and metopes, the entasis of the columns, the subtle curves built into the Parthenon to counteract the optical illusions that perfectly straight lines would produce, that has served as the basis for Western architectural practice from the Roman period to the present day. The Parthenon, despite everything it has suffered, its conversion to a church, its conversion to a mosque, the explosion that destroyed its center in 1687, remains one of the most formally perfect buildings ever constructed, its weathered marble still carrying the ghost of the original precision. Theatre, the art form that Greece gave to the world, was born in Athens in the 6th century BCE from the ritual celebrations of the god Dionysus. The plays of Aeschylus and Sophocles and Euripides are not merely historical documents. They are works that continue to be performed and to move their audiences, that continue to ask questions about justice and fate and the relationship between human beings and the divine that have lost none of their urgency. The theatres themselves, the theatre of Epidaurus, with its extraordinary acoustics that carry a whisper to the back row of its 14,000 seats, the theatre of Dionysus on the slope of the Acropolis where the plays were first performed, are among the most beautiful architectural spaces in the world. Music in Greece has a continuous tradition that reaches from the ancient world to the present day, though the thread becomes difficult to trace clearly across the Byzantine centuries. The ancient Greek understanding of music, its modal system, its theories of the relationship between musical modes and emotional states, influenced Byzantine church music, which in turn influenced the musical tradition of the Orthodox world. The rebetiko, the blues of Greece, born in the urban poverty of the early 20th century, in the cafes and the dens of Piraeus and Thessaloniki, brought partly by the refugees from Anatolia who arrived after 1922, is one of the great popular music traditions of the 20th century. The bouzouki sound, its metallic shimmer, its blue note inflections, is the sound of Greek longing, of Kefi and of pain, of the city and the sea simultaneously. Rebetiko gave way to Laika, popular Greek music of the post-war decades, and to the great composers and singers of that era, Mikis Theodorakis, whose music gave voice to the political aspirations and the cultural identity of the Greek people across decades of struggle, and Manos Hadjidakis, whose more lyrical and more European sensibility produced songs of extraordinary beauty and melancholy. Theodorakis set the poems of the Nobel laureate Giorgos Seferis to music, and the combination of the modern Greek poetic tradition with the rebetiko-influenced musical tradition produced something of extraordinary richness, a music that was simultaneously rooted and cosmopolitan, ancient and contemporary. Greek literature has one of the longest continuous traditions in the world. From Homer through the lyric poets, Sappho, Pindar, Anacreon, through the philosophical prose of Plato and Aristotle and Thucydides, through the Byzantine hymns of Romanos the melodist, through the Cretan Renaissance poetry of the 16th and 17th centuries, and into the modern period with its Nobel laureates, Giorgos Seferis in 1963 and Odysseus Elates in 1979. Greek literature is a river that has been flowing without interruption for 3,000 years. The poetry of Elates, with its solar imagery and its celebration of the Aegean light, is perhaps the most purely Greek of literary creations, rooted in a specific landscape and a specific sensibility while achieving a universal expressiveness that belongs to no single culture alone. Greek cinema found its international voice in the work of Theodoros Angelopoulos, whose slow, meditative films, The Travelling Players, Landscape in the Mist, Eternity, and A Day, used the Greek landscape and the Greek historical experience as the material for a cinema of extraordinary formal discipline and emotional depth. Angelopoulos's films are not narratives in the conventional sense. They are experiences of duration, of space, of the weight of historical time on the present moment, of the longing, the Greek longing, the nostalgia, for something that has been lost and cannot quite be named. In the quiet rhythm of everyday life, the systems that organize a society shape experience in ways that are often invisible until they are tested. In Greece, these systems carry the particular character of a country that invented many of the foundational concepts of Western governance: democracy, the rule of law, the idea that the citizen has rights against the state, and that has, in its modern form, worked out the practical application of these ideals in a constitutional democracy now half a century old. The Greek contribution to the theory of governance is incalculable. The practice of governance in a modern nation-state is, as everywhere, a more complicated matter. Greece is a parliamentary republic, with a constitution that was adopted in 1975 following the restoration of democracy after the military junta period. The constitutional framework provides for a unicameral parliament of 300 members, elected by proportional representation, and a government that must maintain the confidence of the parliamentary majority. The President of the Republic, elected by Parliament, serves as head of state in a largely ceremonial role, while the Prime Minister and the Cabinet exercise executive power. The independent judiciary, including the Supreme Civil and Criminal Court and the Council of State, provides the constitutional framework of legal protection. The Greek legal tradition has deep roots in the Roman law tradition, which was itself heavily influenced by Greek philosophical concepts of justice and governance. The Byzantine legal tradition, the codifications of Justinian and his successors, mediated between the ancient Roman heritage and the modern Greek legal system, and the modern civil and criminal codes reflect this long lineage. The emphasis in Greek legal culture on written law, on procedure, on the rights of the individual against the state, these are values with roots that go back to the Athenian democratic tradition of the 5th century BCE. Education in Greece is taken seriously as both a civic value and a family priority. The public education system provides free schooling from early childhood through secondary school, with a curriculum that includes, at the secondary level, a significant engagement with ancient Greek language and literature, the Greek educational system's way of maintaining the connection between the modern culture and its ancient roots. University education is provided free by the public universities, and admission is determined by national examinations that are the subject of intense preparation by students and families. The tradition of the frontisterio, the private after-school tutoring center, reflects the intense pressure that Greek families place on educational achievement. The Greek Orthodox Church occupies a particular position in the Greek constitutional framework. It is the prevailing religion of Greece, and its relationship with the state is closer than in most other European countries. The Church maintains a significant role in education. Religious education is part of the school curriculum, and in social welfare, through its network of charitable organizations. The celebration of religious holidays as national holidays, the presence of the Church in the ceremonies of the state, these are expressions of the deep integration between Orthodoxy and Greek national identity that has its roots in the Byzantine period and the Ottoman centuries, when the Church was the primary institution of Greek cultural maintenance. The Greek economy is one of the smaller economies in the Eurozone, with particular strengths in shipping. Greece is the largest ship-owning nation in the world, its merchant fleet carrying a significant proportion of global sea trade, in tourism, and in food and agricultural exports. The olive oil, the feta cheese, the wine, the honey that Greece produces are among the most prized of their kind in the world, and the country's agricultural sector, built on the Mediterranean climate and the particular qualities of its soil, continues to produce goods of extraordinary quality. The public healthcare system in Greece, the ESY, the National Health System, provides free healthcare to Greek citizens and residents. The system has faced significant pressures in recent decades, but the commitment to universal healthcare as a right rather than a privilege remains embedded in the constitutional framework and in social values. The network of public hospitals and health centers provides coverage across the country, including the island communities whose accessibility presents particular challenges. Over generations, the social and legal systems of Greece have maintained, imperfectly but persistently, the values of democratic governance and social solidarity that the ancient Athenians first articulated. The tensions between these ideals and the practical difficulties of their application in a complex modern society are real and ongoing, but the underlying commitment to the principle that the citizen has rights, that the law should protect the weak as well as the powerful, that governance should serve the governed, These remain as vital in modern Greece as they were when they were first imagined on the slopes of the Acropolis 2,500 years ago. As night settles over the landscape, over the white and blue islands dreaming in the dark Aegean, over the ancient ruins pale in the moonlight, over the mountains of the mainland wrapped in their summer silence, over the harbors where the fishing boats rock gently at their moorings and the tavernas are finally closing their shutters, the spirit of Greece continues to breathe quietly through its people, its stories, and its timeless traditions. We have walked a long way together in this journey, through history and language, through religion and food, through art and law and the warm, generous fabric of daily custom. We have stood in the shadow of the Parthenon and on the edge of the Aegean. We have eaten feta and grilled fish and baklava drenched in honey, and drunk the resinous wine that has been made in these hills for 4,000 years. We have listened to the rebetiko and the Byzantine chant, to the sirtaki and the silence of the monasteries. We have watched the Easter candle pass from hand to hand through a crowd of thousands, carrying its small, enormous light through the dark. We have sat at tables where the meal refused to end because the conversation was too good. What endures in all of this? What connects the ancient Athenian who argued about justice in the Agora to the old man in the Caphaneo who is still arguing about justice today, the Minoan artist who painted the bull leapers to the contemporary Greek sculptor who works in bronze and marble in a studio above the sea, is something that cannot be easily summarized but can be felt, a love of beauty and a love of argument, a capacity for joy and a tolerance for sorrow, a way of being in the world. That is warm and generous and proud in equal measure. Greece is, above all else, a country that knows how to ask questions. The philosophical tradition that began with Socrates, who claimed to know nothing except that he knew nothing, and who pursued truth through the patient examination of received opinion, is not merely an academic heritage. It is a living disposition, present in the Greek willingness to question everything, to argue every position, to refuse the comfort of easy answers. The Greek conversation that goes on too long is often going on too long because someone has raised a genuinely interesting question and everyone at the table feels the obligation to think it through properly. This is not a flaw. It is the inheritance of the culture that invented the examined life. Greece knows how to remember. The ruins are not merely ruins. They are presences, ongoing conversations between the past and the present that have been maintained for thousands of years. The scholar who reads Sappho in the original Greek is not reading a historical document. She is hearing a voice that speaks directly, across 26 centuries, about love and beauty and longing and loss in language of such freshness and immediacy that the distance of time seems almost irrelevant. The continuity of the Greek language across 3,000 years, the fact that the same alphabet, the same grammatical structures, the same vocabulary is used today as was used by Homer, is one of the most extraordinary facts of cultural history, and it gives modern Greeks a relationship with their ancient past that is qualitatively different from the relationship that other cultures have with theirs. Greece knows how to wait. The philotimo that sustains the Greek in difficulty, the sense of personal dignity that cannot be taken away by external circumstances, is a form of patience rooted in a long view of time. A culture that has survived the Persian Wars and the Peloponnesian War, the Macedonian conquest and the Roman absorption, the Byzantine centuries and the Ottoman rule, the catastrophes of the 20th century. Such a culture has developed a relationship with adversity that is neither passive nor merely stoic. It is the resilience of something deeply rooted, something that knows, from long experience, that this too shall pass. The landscapes of Greece, the sea and the mountains, the islands and the plains, the light that falls on everything with such unsparing clarity, are themselves a kind of argument. They are an argument for the value of beauty as a necessity rather than a luxury, for the value of the particular place and the specific light and the exact quality of the air on a September morning after the first rains. The Greeks have always understood their landscape as a presence to be engaged with, not merely a backdrop. The mountain and the sea are not settings for human life in Greece. They are participants in it. Over generations, the people of Greece have demonstrated a resilience that is expressed not in the language of heroism but in the language of everyday life. In the meal that is made anyway, in the festival that is celebrated anyway, in the conversation that is continued anyway, in the beauty that is maintained anyway. The capacity to find and create beauty in the midst of difficulty is perhaps the most distinctively Greek of all the qualities this culture has to offer. It is the quality that produced the Parthenon and the Byzantine mosaics and the Rebetiko and the poetry of Sepphoris. It is the quality that fills a Greek table even when resources are scarce, that lights a candle in a church even when the lighting of candles seems a small gesture against a large darkness. As you rest now, allow the images and sounds of this long journey to settle gently in your mind. The blue of the Aegean in the afternoon, so blue it seems impossible. The golden stone of the Acropolis against the evening sky. The sound of the bouzouki in a harborside taverna. The smell of oregano and lemon and olive oil. The light of the Easter candles passing from hand to hand through the dark churchyard. The taste of cold water drawn from a mountain spring. The sound of a Yeia's voice telling a story to a child who is already half asleep. Greece is not a single thing. It is a conversation, between the ancient and the modern, the mainland and the islands, the philosophical and the passionate, the formal and the exuberant, that has been continuing for 3,000 years and shows no sign of reaching a conclusion. It is the sound of a culture that has been asking the most important questions since the beginning of recorded thought, and that has found, in the asking, a way of living that is warm and beautiful and alive. The sea moves in the darkness against the island shore, patient and unchanging. The stars are very bright above the Aegean tonight. In a village somewhere, a cafeneo has just closed, and the men who were arguing about something important have said good night to each other and are walking home through the still streets. Somewhere a lamp is still burning in a window. Somewhere a grandmother is asleep in her chair, a saint's icon on the wall above her, a blue-eye amulet at the door. This is Greece, and it has been an honor to walk through it slowly, together, in the long quiet of this night. Rest now. Rest well. The story continues. Thanks for watching. What culture would you like to learn about next? Comment below. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. See you on the next one.